Hi, this is Rudy Giuliani, and you're listening to the audio version of Common Sense. Be sure to head to rudyscommonsense.com. That's rudyscommonsense.com, or the Rumble or YouTube channel to get the full video experience of this podcast. Let's get into it.
He's the mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani.
Make our nation safe again.
Our God-given common sense.
And now, Rudy Giuliani with Common Sense.
Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani, and we're back with another episode of Rudy's Common Sense. And this is an episode that I promised you last time, and it's the one concerning HR1, entitled For the People Act of 2021. And by the time we go into the details of this act, I think you'll conclude with me that it is more like Against the People Act than it is for the people. It's a massive assumption of power by the national government and taking it away from the states. And it's another one of those great leap forwards towards socialism, which we've seen now in the first month and a half of the Biden administration with efforts to considerably redistribute wealth, with efforts to open the border and allow illegal immigrants to come in, give them health care as an incentive to come. So many of those. This one may be the worst of all. HR1 contains other provisions, but we're going to focus right now on the For the People Act, which is the federal government dictating to all of the states how elections for House, Senate, and President should be conducted. Previously, the states and the state legislatures made most of those rules. This passed the House by a vote of 220 yes, 210 no. Every Republican voted against it. Every Democrat but one voted for it. One Democrat voted against it. So it is, again, completely partisan legislation, like what they did with the Obama law. And it is exactly the opposite, again, of what President Biden promised in his inauguration address, which is unity. Unity means bipartisan legislation. Unity means like the Civil Rights Act, the historic Civil Rights Act passed during the Johnson administration with significant Republican support. In fact, critical Republican support to get it passed. This is not unifying. This is exactly what splits a country in half or creates bitter divisions when you pass it without a single vote from the other side, and for good reason. This bill is not at all a serious piece of legislation. This is a massive attack on free and fair elections. All you need is a bit of common sense to figure that out. So let me try to analyze the most difficult and troublesome parts of this bill. It's about 800 pages long. It's another one of those bills that, Pelosi passed and probably once again would say no need to read it until, it becomes law and all these terrible things are done to us. We'll find out after that we can't keep our doctor and that we can't keep our health insurance. And so let's look at the provisions. There are a lot of provisions. Let's look at the main ones. And let me explain to you what they do to support what I'm telling you. So it just isn't my word. Well, the first thing it does is it has the federal government take over the regulation of elections, which is contrary to both our history and our Constitution, where the more significant power in decision-making was put in the hands of the state legislatures in the state, which is precisely what the Constitution says. We'll talk about that at the end, the legal challenge to it. The second thing I would focus on is it provides for automatic voter registration. Now, although we want everyone to vote, and we want to encourage everyone to vote, you do have a right not to vote, which our founding fathers actually emphasized, particularly the fear. I think it was Hamilton who was very afraid that our democracy, our Republican form of government, our republic could be undermined from within by an ignorant electorate. In other words, an ill-informed electorate. Or the more ignorant an electorate is, Hamilton suggested, the more prone it is to propaganda and to being influenced by propaganda. And boy, do we have propaganda in this country now. I mean, we have a totally one-sided press, a totally one-sided technology industry. It actually practices censorship, and it is a complete mouthpiece and propaganda organ for not just the Democrat Party, but the very left socialist wing of the Democrat Party. Automatic voter registration means you're registered to vote, whether you know it or not, whether you want to be or not. Okay, we can live with that. But how about this? Absentee ballots do not require a signature and can be received 10 days after the election. How are you going to verify an absentee ballot if you don't have a signature? Well, we're going to go into that in a moment, because you have to see this in combination with the other very destructive provisions. The law also bans voter identification. So you can't require a signature on an absentee ballot. You can't require a photo identification for an absentee ballot or for voting at the polling place. Is that insane? It is, isn't it? You don't have to identify yourself when you vote? What does that open you up to? So Democrats like to say that the reason for it is that requiring identification and requiring people to access the internet in order to get identification is discriminatory, because in the case of minorities, Black, African Americans, they may also say Hispanics, I'm not sure, but they just are not as prone to being able to do that as others. Do you realize how racist that is? And do you realize how wrong it is? I'm going to interrupt for a moment and play a short excerpt from a piece done back in 2016. That's 5 years ago, by Ami Horowitz. I believe that's the right pronunciation. I don't know if Ami expected these answers, but let's, instead of listening to those who would like to assume that they are in control of the Black community, like when Biden said, if you don't vote for him, you're not African American. Let's ask actual African Americans.
I'm Ami Horowitz, and I'm here in Berkeley, California to find out if voter ID laws suppress the Black vote. Do you have an opinion on voter ID laws?
Yeah, they're usually pretty racist and they're bad. I think voter ID laws are a way to perpetuate racism.
Would you go as far as say those laws are racist?
For sure.
Do you think it suppresses the African American vote?
Definitely.
Tell us how.
Because they're less likely to have state IDs.
Minority voters are less likely to have the kinds of IDs that have been described or required.
These type of people don't live in areas with easy access to DMVs or other places where they can get identification.
You can always get IDs you do over the internet. Does that also make it difficult for Black people in particular?
Yeah, you have to have access to the internet. You have to be able to pay an internet service provider for certain fees.
Do you think that's harder for Black people to go online?
Well, I feel like they don't have the knowledge of how it works.
A lot of people have smartphones, but you might not have data.
For most of the communities, they don't really know what is out there just because they're not aware or they're not informed. I also think there's a repression of Black voting with how if you're a convicted felon, you're not allowed to vote and everything. And when you look at swing states like Florida, that's a huge population of the African Americans.
Now I'm here in East Harlem to ask Black people their thoughts on what you just heard. Do you have ID normally? You carry ID around?
Yes, I have state ID.
Do you carry ID?
Yes, I do.
Do you know any Black person who doesn't carry ID?
No. Everyone that I know has an ID. Why would they think we don't have ID?
That's a lie. Why would they say that?
Do you have ID?
Yes.
Because I have my ID and my friends have their ID, so we know what we need to carry around.
Everybody that I know have ID. That's one of the things you need to walk around with New York with, ID.
Do you know any Black adult who does not have ID?
No, I don't.
Is it a weird thing to even say that?
Yes, it is.
What is this, some type of trick candy cameras?
I know, right? That's the only thing I brought with me.
Those are legit IDs. I heard a lot also that Black people can't figure out how to get to the DMV.
Really?
What does that say to you?
I know it's that. It's on 25th Street.
Do you know where the DMV is around you?
It's on 125th Street and 3rd Avenue, I believe.
You know how to get there?
Yeah.
Would you have a problem getting there if you had to get there?
No.
I know these sound like silly questions. You know how to get to the DMV?
Of course.
You know where it is?
Yes.
You can get there?
Uh-huh.
No problem.
No problem.
Just checking.
Okay.
And I also heard a lot that black people, especially poor black people, have no access to the internet, can't figure out how to use the internet.
That's just stupidity, honestly. Everybody has access to the internet. Even a little kid could figure out how to work the internet.
I had access to the internet for years.
You know how to use it properly, right?
Exactly. I do it at work. So, of course, I know how to use it. My kids know how to use it. They all have iPads, iPods, whatever.
Your phone has data?
Mm-hmm.
You can actually
unlimited.
Unlimited data.
Mm-hmm. I use my phone as a hotspot.
What does that say to you for the people who have this perception of black people?
They're pretty much ignorant. That's what my thought process was.
I just think that's ignorant.
Ignorant.
Ignorant. That's the word I hear
very
a lot.
ignorant.
Ignorant.
Very, very ignorant.
Does it sound racist for somebody to say that?
I think it is a little racist because, you know, you're putting people in a category and you have no idea what you're talking about.
Maybe a little bit of racist in it, but like I said, I think it's more stupidity and ignorance.
You're judging somebody, like, but you're judging them because they black, saying that they don't got it.
What people are they talking to? Who are these people talking to?
Do you have a problem that if you go to vote and they say, "Can we please see your ID to make sure you are who you say you are?" Are you
Love
cool?
showing my ID.
You got no problem with that?
Nope.
Would you have a problem if when you go to vote, if they say, "Can we please just see your ID to make sure you are who you say you are?" Do you have an issue with that?
No.
Would you have a problem if there was a rule where you had to show your ID in order to vote?
I don't think so. No.
Would you have an issue if there was a rule saying you got to show your ID before you vote?
Nah.
Are you cool with that?
Yeah.
So I could produce a lot more of those interviews and testimonials. Do you realize how condescending that is? Do you realize how racist it is? African Americans can't get photo ID? They're going to be discriminated against if you require photo ID to vote? The Democratic Party has become so corrupt. And this assumption that they speak for the African American community when they've done so little for them. And in a few short years, Trump did so much. Well, this would be a good time to take a short break. You never thought COVID could cost you your home, right? You're just right, because cybercrime is up 75%. And by far, the most serious cybercrime to worry about is home title theft. That's right. Cyber criminals, foreign and domestic, are now after our homes, and it's easier than you think. The title documents to our homes are online now. The thief finds your home's title and forges your signature on a quitclaim deed, stating you sold your home to him. Then he takes out loans on your home, and he leaves you in debt. You won't know until late payment or eviction notices arrive. Insurance doesn't cover you, and neither do common identity theft programs. That's why I protect my home with Home Title Lock. The instant Home Title Lock detects someone tampering with my home's title, they help shut it down. Go to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim. Then use code RUDY to receive 30 free days of protection. That's code RUDY at HometitleLock.com. HometitleLock.com. Thank you for coming back. Well, in addition to banning all forms of identification so we don't know who's voting, the law will allow illegal immigrants to vote. You don't have to be a citizen of the United States to vote. You can come in here legally, but not a citizen, you can vote. You can come in here illegally and you can vote. You could just come over, in the thousands just to vote and go back. Do you see now why they're inviting everybody in over the border? Do you see now why Biden says, everybody can become citizens? Do you see why he reversed all of Trump's policies to hold down this mass influx from Mexico? Do you see the reason? See the political reason for it? Illegal immigrants will be allowed to vote under Pelosi's HR1. You'll have same-day registration, which leads to exactly what I'm talking about. You can bring a lot of people over the border. They can come in, they can vote, they can go back. Or you can do what happens in almost every election in Philadelphia. The people can come in from Trenton and vote in Philadelphia, as well as in Trenton. Or they can bring the people in from the suburbs of Chicago and vote. It will allow nationwide mail voting, again, without voter ID or signature. That means that everybody will get a mail vote, I think. That's what, 100, I don't know how many voters. Well, everybody's going to, probably 130 million paper ballots are going to go out all around the country. They'll be floating all around. 130 million, 130 million ballots will be floating out there 50, 60 days before the election. This will mandate early voting. Mandate early voting. And then it requires states to accept ballots 10 days after the election. Since there's also a provision that mandates drop boxes for these mail ballots, and they have to be up 45 days before the election, and they have to be available 24 hours a day. That now makes it over a month for voting. Instead of having an election day, we have an election season longer than the Christmas season. If I add this up correctly, it'll be 55 days. You have to have the drop boxes out before the election, 45 days before. So it starts 45 days before. You don't have to get it in until 10 days after the election. So now we have 55 days to vote. 55 days in which, if there are dishonest people in America, and they are inclined to cheat in elections, wow, you've now given them complete open field. Not going to check signatures, not going to have photo identification, no identification of any kind, and they got 55 days in which to do it. It promotes ballot harvesting. Just a few years ago, we were saying that ballot harvesting was probably just inherently illegal, that it was such a temptation to bribe people to vote. You know, you go collect votes from people. You go around door to door, you collect votes from people, like you used to do the numbers racket. You know how many convictions this has resulted in already? Well, we're going to promote it. It's going to require curbside voting. I don't know, maybe every McDonald's and Wendy's will be a place where, and Burger King, you can drop off your vote there. You don't have to identify yourself, you just drop your vote off. Requires curbside voting. Requires campus vote coordinators. So all the kids who live in a state that they really don't live in because they go to school there, they're not going to have much to do with that state ever, are all going to get to vote. And we're going to encourage as many of them as possible to vote. I mentioned the drop boxes 45 days before the election. This is one that probably, maybe it doesn't apply exactly to what I'm talking about, but this one just tells you how corrupt this party has become. It's going to allow politicians to use campaign funds for personal purposes. You got me? It's going to allow politicians to take money out of their campaign funds for personal use. I guess they figure they do it anyway illegally. We might as well make it legal, right? This is a great way of not violating the law. You know, allow people to steal, then it wouldn't be a violation of the law. It allows 16-year-olds to register. We don't know why it allows 16-year-olds to register, but it does. So let's focus on sort of the big theme, which is that all these mail-in votes are now going to flood the system. 130 million of these ballots are going to be out there. Let's see what the history is in the rest of the world. Well, this is a big left-wing essay on voting back in October of 2020, but even this concludes that out of 166 countries for which data is available, only 40 used postal ballots in their most recent national election before the outbreak of COVID-19. So some of these things were done because of the COVID-19 CCP virus pandemic, but we don't have that emergency any longer. So votes are by and large cast in most countries, 209 out of 227 countries, by paper ballot. You go in, you mark the paper ballot, there's a paper ballot. You don't get involved with these computers. You don't get involved with mail-in ballots. You don't get involved with, and in almost every country, you have to identify yourself. If not every country. I haven't found one where there isn't some form of identification. I imagine there might be one where they just like to have crooked elections. But let's take a look at a couple of surveys. 27 countries in the EU. 63% ban mail-in voting, except for people who live outside the country. Totally different than what we're doing. We're allowing it for everybody. Another 22% require photo ID, which we don't require. And another 21% ban it completely. Completely. No mail-in votes. None. And why do they do it? Because they've had a very, very bad history of cheating with mail-in votes in France, other places. We'll be back in a few minutes. I accomplished a lot in 2020, exposing the truth, establishing the relationship with you, working tirelessly for America. And I came to know the work and value of the people at American Hartford Gold. You see, you buy gold not only for what you know, but you buy gold for what you don't know. American Hartford Gold is the company you can trust when it comes to buying gold. They sell physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or inside of your IRA. In the precious metals industry, they are the highest rated firm in our country with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. Give them a call and tell them Rudy sent you. And be sure to ask them what I bought. And if you call them right now, they will give you up to $1,500 of free silver on your first order. Folks, these are uncertain times. The one thing you can count on to protect what you have worked so hard for is physical gold and silver. So don't wait. Call them now. Call 833-GOLD-777. That's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Again, that's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. So now let's go through the rest of this attack on our democracy. Take another look at, this is an article in, of all places, Newsweek. Again, not a right-wing, this isn't, some right-wing publication. The OECD has 36 member states. Let's call them developed countries, right? 47% ban mail-in voting unless the citizen is living abroad. 30% require photo ID, and 14% ban it completely. Almost every country, if not all countries, requires identification in order to vote by mail. It requires identification, most countries, all countries, to vote. If they held an election based on the rules that the Democrat Party is now dictating from above in Uganda, Jimmy Carter's organization that certifies elections would say it wasn't a free and fair election if they didn't verify votes. Right now, they're doing a recall of Governor Newsom in California. You know what's taking time? Verifying all the signatures. The UK had such a big problem with mail-in balloting that they went to a system where you have to identify, you have to limit mail-in votes. Mexico did the same thing. So the New York Times and all the left-wing so-called progressives who are really regressives like to say that concern about voter fraud is delusional. I'm going to read to you from the article in Newsweek written by John Lott, and this is from very recent, probably looks to be March 8th. Think about that. Here's his conclusion, and this is said so well, no reason to paraphrase it. If concern about voter fraud with mail-in ballots is delusional, it's a delusion that is shared by most of the world. Even the countries that allow mail-in ballots have protections, such as government-issued photo IDs. But Americans are constantly assured that even this step is completely unnecessary. And they're told that it's discriminatory, but you've seen that it's not. Without basic precautions, our elections are on course to becoming the laughingstock of the developed world. Our elections are on course to become the laughingstock of the developed world. That's what HR1, Pelosi, and Biden want to do to you. They want to make your elections, in the words of Newsweek, the laughingstock of the developed world. But not for just making it a laughingstock. This isn't for comedy. The reason for it is so that we can have one permanent party in this country. That's why it's a great leap forward towards socialism. Be the Democrat Party. The provisions in the spirit of this show defy common sense. You don't need a signature. You don't need a photo ID. Unlimited mail-in ballots. A person could send in 100 and you wouldn't know it. No ability to verify afterwards. No identification of any kind for mail-in votes, for the ones you put in the drop box, and the ones you go to the poll, when you go to the polls. You can't ask somebody for their identification. You got to ask yourself, why are they doing this to us? Why are they doing this to us? They're doing this to us because they want to be the permanent party. They got the presidency, they've got the House, they've got the Senate. Now, admittedly, very close. We're tied in the Senate. We're 9 votes off in the House, Republicans. In fact, in this present vote, we got 1 Democrat to come over. So it's perilously close for these people who feel that they have to run this country forever. So they're now trying to codify laws that would make them the permanent party as if we were a banana republic. Are you going to see through it? Will you use your common sense to see that what I'm saying to you is not just my biased opinion? That this is the opinion of almost all the rest of the world? Even socialist countries, like in Northern Europe, require photo identification and signatures. In fact, they're among the strictest. Now, let me just briefly tell you that much of this is unconstitutional. First of all, as it relates to the presidential election, I don't know where the Congress gets the right to prescribe any rules or regulations except to determine the time of choosing the electors and the day of the election. The Constitution is quite clear. I mean, we'll put this up. These are the 3 provisions. There's just 3 that really bear on federal elections. And Section 4 does give Congress a role. And it gives Congress a role in the election of senators and representatives. It's the time, places, and manner provision. That's Article 1, Section 4. The times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives, notice, doesn't say president, shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. But the Congress may, at any time by law, make or alter such regulations, except as to the places of choosing senators. So Congress does have a role in overseeing what was presumed to be, by and large, a state-run process. Now, it doesn't say that Congress can take it over and basically remove the states from any decision-making. So there'll be a constitutional challenge to that, and it'll be a good one. But one that you'd have to say, hard to determine exactly where the court's going to go. But I think they'll find some of these things so intrusive that it has defied Article 1, Section 4, because it leaves no role for the state legislature. But here's one that's clear as a bell. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2. Here, Congress has no role at all. Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. That's for selecting the president. I don't see the word Congress there. Congress was given no role in the rules, regulations of choosing a president. They have just assumed them unconstitutionally in this legislation. They do, in Clause 5, have a limited role, which shows that the framers were clear. This is the one limited role they have. And remember, the Constitution gives power to specific branches of government and limits it. So if it's not there, you can't assume it. Section 1, Clause 5. The Congress may determine the time of choosing the electors and the day on which they shall give their votes, which day shall be the same throughout the United States. So Congress does have a role in choosing the president at the election stage. And that role is to pick election day. The rest, the manner of it, is as the legislature thereof may direct. That's for president. The manner of it is as the legislature may direct with regard to senators and congressmen, but Congress may intervene. So all these provisions that you see with regard to the presidential election, any state can vary, and I believe it's quite clear the Supreme Court would uphold it. So a state can say, you don't want photo ID? Tough luck, Congress. You have no role in selecting a president. We're going to have photo ID for the presidential election. We're going to have signatures. We're not going to have mail-in balloting for the presidential election. The big issue, the big confusion will be, can they do that for the elections for Senate and for the House? You could argue they assume too much power in blowing out the power of the legislatures, which seems to be the primary one in Article 1, Section 4. You could say it was a reasonable intrusion. I think it isn't, but that argument will be a very close one in the court. So you could have two different methods, the Senate and House on the one hand and president on the other. Gosh, I hate to break this up, but we got to take a short break. My friends, if you want to help preserve America right now, while you still can, join AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, the fastest growing conservative group in America, especially for those age 50 and up. Joining AMAC gives you access to money-saving benefits, cutting-edge news, and a great bi-monthly magazine. More importantly, AMAC fights for you. A socialist storm is brewing. Our constitutional republic has rarely faced the perils we do today. Edmund Burke said it best. All it takes for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. If you care about our future like I do, then join AMAC today. Over 2 million conservatives like you and me have already joined AMAC. Stand with us by joining right now. Just go to amac.us/Rudy. That's amac.us/Rudy. The benefits of AMAC membership are great, but the cause is even greater. Join today at amac.us/Rudy. Thank you for coming back. That's the legal analysis of it. But the thing I'd be most concerned about is, once again, take off your Republican hat, your Democrat hat, your liberal hat, your conservative hat, your pro-Trump hat, your Trump-hating hat, your all those prejudices that cloud our thinking and our mind. With the passions that we have, with the fact, as James Madison said very, very brilliantly, if people were all honest, we wouldn't need government. So we just have to realize that a certain significant number, if not significant, certainly appreciable enough so we have a large number of people in prison, a certain number of people are crooked. And in politics, some people believe that it's disproportionately high. But let's assume it's just normal. You give them an opportunity to cheat. It's human nature that a certain number of people are going to cheat. You put out millions of dollars in jewels on a street corner. You don't have any camera. You don't have anybody around, which is tantamount to having no photo ID, no signature. Nobody will ever know if you stole the jewels. Nobody will ever check. They're not allowed to. You think those jewels would get stolen by somebody? Yes. So these laws are not just unconstitutional. They defy common sense. These are laws that don't exist in any other country that I know of. These are laws that have been rejected in most other countries. Countries that are even socialist countries, countries that are even somewhat or very much corrupt countries in other respects. But they don't want their elections to be corrupted. We will probably have one of the worst election systems in the world if we pass this Democrat bill. And we will be a laughingstock. And then we will have to go to the court to try to correct it, and then we'll have to see how far the court goes. But this, ladies and gentlemen, is an attack on all of us. This is a disgraceful attack on all of us with the great lie that this is to protect minorities from voter suppression. Look, you heard the few that we interviewed. The way they're protected is voter suppression is you require someone to have a photo ID. Well, people need a photo ID to get on a plane. People need a photo ID to get medical care. People need photo ID to get welfare. How are you discriminating against them, saying they needed to vote to make certain that people don't illegally vote and therefore take the vote away from a person who's legal? Now, how can you say that it's discriminatory to have someone sign a mail-in ballot so you can check and make sure that a person votes only once? Who does that discriminate against other than the person who wants to cheat? And to say that that discriminates against minorities is to suggest that minorities are all ignorant, dishonest. Minorities, however we define them, are just like everybody else. A lot of good people, a lot of average people, and some crooked people. Absolutely true of all politicians, right? Some good ones, some average ones, and some crooked ones. I don't know. I'd kind of go with the minorities and the poor people in terms of the balance there. But it sure is racist, condescending, elitist, and anti-American to suggest we're protecting people because they don't know how to get a photo ID. They don't know how to use the internet because they're minorities. They must not be as smart as we are. Totally wrong. Horrible, horrible attitude to have for people that are attempting to lead the greatest democracy in the history of the world. And if they get to lead it too long, we will not be the greatest democracy in the history of the world. They are making tremendous inroads in that. They've made tremendous inroads in the right of free speech, tremendous inroads in the right to practice religion, tremendous inroads in individual decision-making, tremendous inroads in the balance between the federal government and states. This is a massive assumption of power by the federal government and destruction of power given to state governments. How much more are they going to do in their great leap forward to socialism? How much more will we let them get away with? Let's hope this doesn't pass the Senate. And let's hope we have a Supreme Court that can interpret the Constitution the way it's written. Not worry about what the popular reaction is going to be. We're at a really difficult time in our history. I hope you realize how serious it is. This one illustrates it, but there are so many others. So I would ask you to do everything you can within the law and peacefully and patriotically to oppose this. Organize, write, call, And then remember, we've got elections coming up. And the best way to change this is to remember who supported this and don't vote for them, because they don't understand our way of life. They don't understand America, and they're trying to destroy it. I'm sorry I have to say that. I think if you take away all the emotion and all the prejudices, you'll see that my analysis of this is correct, balanced, common sense, and logical. I'll leave you with the following thought. 130 million paper ballots floating around the country, when they can be sent in and nobody will ever know who sent them in, whether they were valid or invalid, because there'll be no signature, no photo ID. And you know what happens to us? We become something other than a democracy. Thank you very much for your time. This is a really important subject. We'll keep track of it and we'll keep you abreast of what's going on here, but we need your participation in this. You need to let the senators and congressmen know that this is a dividing line that I would recommend. I would never vote for anyone who supported this, because anyone who supports this is attacking our Constitution, our method of voting, our democracy, our Republican form of government. And they don't deserve to hold public office. Well, thank you again, and God bless America.